Hello, everybody, and welcome to another week of Paul and Vince's excellent hobby and painting adventure. All right, it's party time. It's excellent.
Party time.
Yes. So, we're back. Absolutely. So, how did you enjoy this challenge, Paul?
It was great. I loved it a lot. I want to do it next week.
Yeah, all the time, just all that. So, for those of you who do not remember, or maybe this is your first time, what we did is last week we set up our challenge for this week, and we had 2 weeks to complete a models with
A model. A model.
Z is optional for non-metallic metal steel. So this is your or something in that gray range, I guess. So obviously, just to sort of level set up at the top, what is non-metallic metal? Paul, why don't you take us? What is non-metallic metal painting?
So non-metallic metal is very self-explanatory. It's using non-reflective paints to create a reflective surface. So you're using extreme contrast to create your steel or your armor sort of look. It's a very technique intensive, I would say, skill. It's one of the more upper echelon in terms of blending and whatnot, and in time invested in the painting that you would use. And it tends to give more of a, I guess, cartoony look would be the appropriate term, not in a bad way, but it's more of that fantasy figure model. It's very, very reflective, a very, very extreme contrast. It really catches the eye. When you're talking about smaller models, that can be a very desirable effect.
Yeah, agreed. You know, talking about the smaller models, I remember, Ross figure painting made a point that he in his commission work he'll often do like 10 millimeter or even sometimes like 6 millimeter figs, for the massive historical games. And on in those, he almost always uses non-metallic metals because it's so easy to do the high contrast at that small of a level, and you don't really have to worry about blending because it's so tiny, right? It's literally just like a little bit of dark to a little bit of light, and instantly your eye makes it look metal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, I mentioned this to you before we went live. I think this is kind of a scary thing to people. People think about, they hear non-metallic metal, they kind of raise up in their seat a little as they clench. And they're like, oh, God, that seems so impossible. What does it even mean? I wouldn't know where to begin. Well, here's the trick. I guarantee you have looked at 10 reference pictures of non-metallic metal, and you haven't even thought about it. And that's probably in the last week. Why? Because you read a book like this. Every comic book, every Warhammer book, every 2D art, and that's the trick. Painting non-metallic metals is actually a very, very, very old thing. I think the original style was like started being done in like the 14th century. But this, like Archaon's metal on his armor, this is exactly the thing I'm talking about here. Very dark to very light. There's no reflective paint used in this. This is all the illusion of non-metallic metal. And here's another one right here in a completely different sort of color scheme on Village the Curseling, right? His armor looks like lacquered metal, but of course that's just different shades of paint or ink or whatever. It's really ink in a book, but just all blended together. Okay. And if you flip through these big books, that's all you're going to see. A ton of references like that. You look in comics, you look in your army books, you look at anything, just tons of source material out there.
And I don't know if you did do this. I sent you that link about, there is bajillions of tutorials for this on the internet. We obviously are not doing tutorials here, but there's so much reference material and so many tutorials, really good ones. If Vince wants to, he can put down the link I gave to him in the comments below and anything he found for some reference material. And there, a lot of them, step by step. Some sort of things are just, there to get you the reference of where the light is hitting and whatnot. But there's tons of resources for this online. So it's not something you would be going into blind. There's tons to look at and tons of stuff to help you.
Yeah, absolutely. And you shouldn't be scared by a painting challenge like this, because it can be really rewarding. It's fun to push yourself. There is a lot of reference material out there. I will put those links down below. I think that's a great idea, Paul. And the reality is it's fun to challenge yourself because, and this is another thing I've said it to a couple different people over doing this. I think I learned more, honestly, doing this challenge than and sort of felt like I advanced more as a painter just in this last 2 weeks than I have previously in any similar 2-week time span, because doing this to make it look right will make you really, really focus on contrast and where the light is hitting your model and on your blends and stuff like that. A lot of things that are just, you know, fundamentals to doing great work when painting, and this will force you to get better at them.
So just to build off that, again, just hammer it home, one of the most translational techniques in painting, for figure painting, right? If you get good at this, you will be good at so many other things, so many other techniques, and just generally good painting. Your brush control and everything like that will vastly improve once you nail it down, because you need all these techniques to be able to, not in a scary way, you need to use all these techniques to achieve this effect, which is a good thing, which is what we're looking for, right? You know what I mean? It's just, this is the hardcore training for your paintbrush, right? If you're gonna go get intense, this is the way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, in Rocky 4 or whatever, you know, Rocky doesn't have a spa day when he's training to fight Ivan Drago. You know, he gets up in the mountains and he starts like running in up and down mountains and punching meat and stuff, right, or whatever. That's like, you got to you do the hard work now, because doing all those things he's doing give him the fundamentals to go succeed in the ring. It's the same story. And if you just loop the Rocky music on while you're painting, I think that would really help too.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know I do my best work.
I don't know how else you would do
it. Right. Yeah, when I paint, it's just a 24-hour loop of Eye of the Tiger. Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to throw up one tip before we start, though. As you're kind of hinting at, non-metallic metals is a lot of layering, a lot of contrast. And if you're going to try for this for the first time, what I would suggest doing is looking at a lot of those reference materials. And one of the things that helped me speed this along, because this is sort of an arduous task if you know, kind of struggle through it, you know, if you're learning a lot the first time. If you do want to start something, I would suggest starting with gold. I think gold is actually an easier color to maintain. And if you look here, I have about 7 or 8 dropper bottles. These are pre-mixed. There's a lot of recipes for these online, and you can really just figure out, it's not, the point is not, you know, what colors to use. It's by having these pre-mixed, you can sort of build those layers and shades just by doing small blends and building up without having to mix your paints every time. And I think that really speeds along the process, so you can really focus on, you know, getting the light layers and working on the transitions in a light angle more so than worrying about mixing your paints the whole time, because that can get very frustrating. So if you're gonna hit it the first time, you know, I would say gold's a little bit easier, a little more forgiving, I think. Other people may find it differently, but that's where I would start, and I would suggest trying to pre-mix your paints, you know, anywhere between 5 and 8 colors, and, you know, between shades and whatnot. And again, there's a lot of references for that, and if someone wants the recipe that I used, I'd be happy. They can just, you know, message me below or whatever, and I could give you those. But pre-mixing those was definitely something that sped along the process when I first was doing non-metallics. So I think that that's something I would recommend doing.
I like it. That's a good tip. That's solid. And I would definitely second that like gold is easier than steel or anything else. Yeah, 100%. It's a much more forgiving set of colors you're working with, actually, just because of their natural translucence. All right.
Yes.
So shall we look at some photos?
Let's do it.
All right. Let me screen share up here. All right, are you looking at can you see this chaos? Oh, you know what, before I do that, let's go back here. Oh, big scary thing. All right, now back to this. All right, can you see your Chaos Lord?
I can.
There we go. We'll lock myself down so that way it's looking at only the photo and not jumping over to you when you talk. All right, so this is your finished Chaos Lord here, and yes, we can see the non-metallic metal in action. In the grays of his armor, as well as the gold. I see you did it for the whole shebang here, right?
Mm-hmm. It was too much metal to have one color, so I had to do two.
Makes sense. All right, so walk us through, man.
All right, so I picked this piece. I was looking for something interesting to do. I don't play Chaos, so I thought it was kind of fun. It's a very nice model. Aesthetically, some people don't like it, but I just meant like assembly-wise, it was really, really nice. It was easy to put together, and very easy to clean. The challenging part was there's a lot of very different angular surface on here. There's very, very different angles where the light's going to hit and stuff like that. So it was very challenging to put together all of the surfaces, especially when I had to assemble it in pieces, because there's obviously the cape and the sword and stuff's kind of stuck between there. So what I did here was I started with all the non-metallic steel surfaces. That's just where I started. That's what I wanted to get done, and I tried to keep my orientation all the same. I chose for this for steel. Some people just do black to white, just with grays in the middle. I find this looks a little flat, is the best word I could think of. So what I use 4 colors. It's going to be hard to see. I used pure black, what's called a somber gray by Game Air, which is sort of a purplish gray, bluish, a dark bluish gray. And then wolf gray, which is sort of a light white grayish blue, and then pure white. I find that adding purples or blues to your steel kind of makes it come alive a little bit more, doesn't make it quite as bland. And you just have to work sort of the angles. Everything here was, I never pre-mixed anything. Everything was just working up and then working back. There was a lot of things where I would do the middle tones. So I would do my somber gray and then do some harsh highlighting and then reglaze over the whole piece with something darker back down to the somber gray, and sort of just built up these layers. There was a lot of standing there. I don't want anyone to think that I just started painting this model. There was a ton of time where I just sat there and looked for where the light was going to hit, and then also looked at reference material. I spent a lot of time staring and then refixing things. A lot of times I would layer up something and go, well, that doesn't quite look right, and then sort of rewash it back down and sort of relight into a different area or a different amount of area until it felt okay. You look at a model and there's always room where you're like, I feel like I could have done that spot better or this spot better. But I feel like it took a little while to get where I wanted it, but it seemed okay to me. If you want to flick through another picture, that's fine, as I'm just kind of talking here.
It's a nice one because you can see the flames on the cape and the cracks in the sword, neither of which are exactly what we're covering today, but they're excellent work.
Yes, thank you. So a lot of that stuff, so the flames on the back was sort of a natural flame technique that I tried to do that wasn't the focus of today, but it was something that sort of I used to kind of occupy my time between doing a ton of non-metallic metal. Sometimes you just get a little burned out and need to step away from that technique because it is sort of time consuming. So that and the skin and the horns and stuff offered sort of a break from just doing the 4 colors over and over again. There was very little airbrush on this, but airbrush is actually a very good friend to non-metallic metal. Some of the shoulder plaid and things like that were started with an airbrush and then finished with a regular brush. None of this has to be done with an airbrush. Again, a majority of this is not done with an airbrush. But it's the same concept. You just pick the angle of light where I had this kind of sort of coming in from the top right diagonal. That's where the light was coming from. And so that's where I picked. And every edge is actually done up to almost a pure white. So that comes back to the contrast of trying to go from pure black, if not very, very close to pure black, or just a little bit above that, to almost white. So that's where I went. This is supposed to be a Zinch guy, so that's why I went with the pink on the cape, as well as, if we keep going, I have some very, very bright blue and turquoise in the back.
Yeah, I want to put one thing out here real quick, and that is just, if we look at this leg plate right here, so it's his right thigh plate. You know, we talked about the key to non-metallic metals being contrast, right? And this little ridge line in the center of the plate is such a perfect example of that, because you have this dark up here in the corner transitioning up to this pure white hard ridge line, and then boom, we go all the way back down to basically like a blackish gray right on the other side. it makes it look like that actual, you know, reflective line that's casting a hard shadow on the other side. That is, you know, that's really capturing that well. I think that's that little that really just exemplifies that whole technique right there.
Oh, so this one, the weapon got a little dark, and that's actually, we could even go back to that weapon one. That might be okay.
Sure.
So the weapon's interesting because it has sort of a glowing effect as well as non-metallic metal, and so this might not be the best example of how to do a weapon, but it's very, you can sort of see at the tip how it would be done, where it's kind of similar to the leg pad that Vince just showed, where you have the light coming across, catching on the tip, and then sort of fading to black, and then re-catching on the edge. Here it's just interesting because there's sort of a glowing light source in the middle, so it sort of fades out. But the very tip of the spear is sort of the concept you're going for. I don't know, Vince, you got anything to say about that?
It's great. I love the effect on the sword. Why don't you walk us through just real quick? Because I think this is a great effect, and even though it's not the main focus, I think it's really nice. So what was your actual steps here? Like, what did you start with? Did you start by laying down the blue in the cracks and then going up to a white, and then kind of when you were doing your non-metallic metal around, did you sort of glaze some of that blue over it, or what were your steps?
So I don't want to scare anyone. I did the entire sword as though it had nothing in the middle. So I did non-metallic metal straight up the entire way. What I did after that was I coated with a very glazed coat using an airbrush in the middle black to create the base aura effect. And then what I did was I layered in white into the cracks because those are actual cracks, and then picked out the edges a little bit with more white. Glazed in some blue, and then re-picked out more white into the deeper recesses. Then I edged in some of the cracks with some black, and then I re-glazed over with some more blue, and then more white, and then I went over the airbrush with a candy coat of plasma blue from Minotaur, which is a favorite glowing effect, and that's how I got the middle part there. I find that, especially when I'm doing something like object source lighting, or object source lighting in conjunction with non-metallic metal, you sort of just have to do one and then the other as though they are there the whole time. So that's really how I got the effect. I had to just do the entire non-metallic effect on the blade and then go back through and do the lighting through it.
Gotcha. Well, it came out really well. Definitely worth the effort. I think it looks great.
Thanks.
All right, so here now we've got the back of the guy and his cloak.
So we had some Zinj colors with the blue and the green there, and that's sort of why I went gold as well. This did get a little interesting. So that big shoulder pauldron, I guess would be the proper term, correct? Yes. Is interesting because the light source, it's kind of coming down around where the light source would be in terms of that. So I sort of made it a little bit less bright as I did on the front. That was partially unintentional, partially intentional. It could have been a little bit brighter in terms of contrast. The photo's a little bit dark. I think it's a little bit brighter in real life, but it was one of those things that I just kind of used the same sort of technique over here, just made it a little bit less of a contrast to simulate a little bit darker on the back side here. Other than that, don't know what else to talk about on here. That's sort of why it was a little bit soul crushing, was it was the same technique repeatedly, just on this plate with this angle or this plate with that angle. The one thing that I can say too is, instead of flat surfaces where you have some reflective things, make sure you also look at some circles and some cylinders, because they do not reflect light like you would think. It's not just like sort of, one side shiny, one side is not shiny. It actually kind of goes to that white line is actually down the cylinder with sort of lighter ends. And you can sort of see that, like if you hold up you can actually hold up. So I have my, what is this, razor blade tip here that's a sort of a reflective cylinder. And you can hold it up in the light and you'll see that there's a white strip that goes down with some lighter reflections in there as well. So make sure to differently look at different objects. So like his leg armor had some more cylinders that had to have that effect on it. Again, so it's really just nailing down the one effect and then keep redoing it, just paying attention to the angle the whole time and where it would light and where it would dark.
Absolutely. Yeah, globes, very round things are always are a real challenge when it comes to this sort of a technique. To anything like that, they're much trickier to highlight than angular things. You know, hard angles create edges that allow things like edge highlighting and stuff like that with either large flat surfaces or very big globes or gems, or not gems, sorry, globes or cylinders. Yeah, it can get a little trickier. All right, good stuff. I love this model. I think this is great. You really, I mean, it's fantastic, Chaos Lord. It's a shame you don't have an army to put him in.
If somebody wants it, let me know.
I think you know. Well, now you've got Skaven, so now you can play the Grand Army of the Everchosen just to add a single Chaos Lord. You know, there you go. Yeah. Just Skaven plus this guy. Okay, very good. All right, so ready to move on?
Yep.
All right, so this was my piece here, one of them. So this is a slightly different take on this technique. And so this is a skull cannon, obviously, although not a stock skull cannon, perhaps also obviously. This is, it's got like a big old style metal warp lightning cannon on the back, which made this a real pain in the butt to work with because this thing is so ridiculously top heavy that 10 pounds of metal cannon sitting on top of a plastic model. Mm-hmm. But this is my attempt at Sky Earth non-metallic metal. And so Sky Earth non-metallic metal is usually done when you want to replicate chrome. So if you think of like Colossus and how Colossus is drawn, when you see Colossus, he has a bunch of very dark and very stark highlight in him. And if you look closely, what that actually is that's the horizon line reflecting in him, as well as whatever else is around him, right? And so what you're trying to replicate here is the effect of something so completely reflective, so mirrored, that it literally picks up just the horizon around it. And so the trick to this is to have the lightest part, your horizon, this is all the sky up top here, right? Your horizon should be the brightest down near the horizon line or near an edge that's going to reflect light. And then fade up to a more gray or azure or like kind of that bluish type color. And your horizon, your Earth that it's reflecting, should be the darkest of everything because it has to do with the way the light is reflecting. And in some of the links I'll put below, you can see like the scientific explanation for why the horizon is the darkest and the ground nearest to you, which is what would be reflecting at the bottom, is actually the brightest. Effectively, it's because more of that light is hitting you. And so this was a very perhaps psychotic and challenging piece. I've never used this technique before, and this was just like to try to do it on this first was perhaps a bit lunatic.
Yeah, I'm just going to jump in right there. This is a very good first piece. I definitely don't want to. I just want to emphasize how challenging, I guess, this piece was to select. So again, he's saying, so not only is he using the heavy contrast of non-metallic metal to try and create something reflective, he's also using, flat colors to replicate reflections onto that. So not only do you have to worry about where the light is coming, you have to worry about where the Earth reflection is coming from. So I think that the cannon on top was an absolutely fantastic job, especially how you made that wavy on a cylinder is absolutely phenomenal. You also made it challenging on yourself because you mounted this thing on a sort of upward angle.
Yes, which was not smart. And I thought I adjusted for the horizon line in the model. Like I tried to compare it because I was painting it obviously off of this base. but I didn't quite get it. It's still like angled a bit. The horizon is not as flat as it should be.
Yeah,
So that was unfortunate.
I think you nailed a lot of it. I mean, I think that the cannon itself. So the other problem is you have two stacks, right? You have two stacks of metals, and again, I'm saying this in the nicest possible way. This is a phenomenal first attempt. You would guess you've been doing this for a very long time. But you have metal stacked over metal, right? Which is another challenging aspect to actually pay attention to all the angles, which I'm not even saying you probably should in this case. I think you would drive yourself insane. But then sort of like down by the teeth on the bottom there, that's really the only spot I'm sort of like, well, you know, that angle of the sky earth could probably be a little bit different, you know, maybe rotate it a little bit just because the angle's so sharp that it's going up. And maybe just I think that oh, I'm kind of blanking his name, said someone commented on this and said, you know, I think that there's maybe a tad bit more orange from the lava.
Yes.
And I think that may be fair from some of the closer stuff, maybe underneath the maw mouth area. But Vince, man, you killed this one. I think the color choices on the chrome is very perfect. It's nice and blue. I really like that. And then sort of the earthy tones is really matching. So overall, it's a phenomenal piece. I just think that, you know, you picked a doozy on
Yeah, and exactly. It was extra challenging because also, so not only did I put it at an angle, not only did I pick this ridiculous piece, but in addition, then yes, as you mentioned, it's lava that it's got to be reflecting, not normal Earth. Normal Earth is only reflecting the light of the sun bouncing off of it, whereas
So
this actually is emanating light.
Other light piece too.
Yeah, and so like if you look here, you can see like the brighter aspect here and down here where it actually goes to yellow. It cuts out a little bit of the yellow. Let me see here. There you go. That one will show it to you better. So you can see how.
Yep.
There you go. When you look at it from this angle, and really that is part of it. Like if you flip this model, you really see the yellow. And then I also had to worry about like a little bit of OSL glow. If you do this but don't have some OSL on the other parts, just a little bit here and there, it's just not going to resonate. So if you look up here on this piston, you can see there's just a hint of red tinge to the piston. Same with kind of the back of the wheel here and underneath this on the metal and here on the wheel. Right, so there's just the idea that it's you know it's red because there's ruddy glow casting up on the rocks. It would also theoretically be casting up here to some degree too.
Yeah. Again, I'm not bashing by any means. I think this.
Oh no, not at all.
It's just that was an utterly ridiculous angular attempt of a model, right? First attempt, I'm gonna do all spherical, crazy surfaces with an additional light source in the bottom on a 45-degree angle.
Well, I felt like, you know, go on.
All right, Vince, you do what you want.
This the most challenging piece was this right here. This little piece over the under wheel, because technically this is chrome, right?
Yeah.
And so it would be reflecting up, so it should be catching the sky to some degree, but it's also being covered by this flesh.
So it should be like dark and flesh tony.
Yeah, so I had to I tried, this is the part I'm the least, I worked with this a long time and I'm still not totally happy with the results, but what I was aiming at here was having, if you look at, I think there's color differentiation that if you look at it, you do see, this is supposed to be tinged with the reflection of this flesh above it. So I did the full normal thing like this, I did all of this down here and then took a flesh tone glaze and went over it and tried, and then redid white toward the edge over the flesh tone. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it actually worked out, but you know, hey, that's what I was aiming at, so whatever. I think I probably could have done it a little better.
Are hard to catch. Even in my model, that's I think pretty coarse highlights. Photos are hard to do. It's sort of hard to catch the nuances of some of the things, you know, not in person.
Right. Yeah. When I look at it, the things I know I missed are this little piece right here. This should have been sky, right? This should not be lava. What is this reflecting? Unless it's literally reflecting this thing right here, right? If it's
you just triple bouncing.
Yeah, I mean,
reflecting
that's what it's reflecting the lava reflection onto this thing, hence why it's that color. I totally intended that. Well, why would you question me? No, so I mean, it's just there's a lot of angles, and it's funny when you get into the chrome thing because you got to think about what's constantly reflecting what. Again, if you look right here, this is a dark ridge line like this. There's actually a little dark shadow right here where the light from this barrel would be reflecting down.
Yeah.
right? So it's just, I mean, you can drive yourself crazy if you go far enough with this.
Yeah, and I think that for me, like if you have your mouse just a little bit to the left of that ridge, so where you have Earth there and then going to sky again, I think I agree with that. I just think the angle on the 45 maybe rotated a little bit more.
Yeah, the blue should actually maybe come to like right here instead
Yeah.
of cutting down here. Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard to tell without seeing the angle of the model, but yeah, again, it's so many different angles on that model. It's such a complex model to begin with that I think you pulled it off quite nicely.
Yeah, I think this is definitely a factor of it being on the incline as opposed to how I was initially trying to do it. Because when I looked at it and sort of drew my line across it in pen of what I thought it was going to be angled at, but I didn't think about this down here, right? I drew it kind of across here, and I still didn't get it exactly right. But I never thought about this because at flat, this is actually pointed down.
That was my first thought. It's like I'm sure that was just a sort of a rotation thing from putting it up on that,
Yep.
stone aspect on the bottom of the base. So I think that, I mean, again, that's just extra challenge that you put on yourself.
Why not? And just to be fair,
I think though, like the gun barrel and then the top half of the model looks utterly phenomenal. And again, it's just sort of minor orientation things on the bottom are the only flaws I really see. And even then, as a model as a whole, it just looks great. Just looking at the model, I think that it really captures what you're supposed to be doing with non-metallic metals. Is making this sort of bright, eye-catching model that painters love because it is so eye-catching.
Yeah.
Even if you don't like that type of art, that cartoony type, you can't argue that it's not eye-catching and sort of beautiful in a sense.
Absolutely. No, and this was a lot of time, but it was honestly a really fun challenge. And I just the amount of times I think I was done and then go back and do like another 2 hours on, some plates or something, right? Yeah. And just to be fair, there is a little bit of regular steel, non-metallic metal in here too, not chrome, in these pistons down here.
Okay.
See, you can at this angle, you can see how it's very gray.
And then again, this is a testament to you doing pretty well. But the gold is actually metallic on this, correct?
Yes, the gold is actually metallic. Yeah, yeah. I use the same techniques for contrast with the gold. I just did it in real gold because I would have lost my brain trying to paint, like if I would have had to paint all of that in non-metallic metal gold too. But I mean, that being said, that's probably 4 or 5 different shades of gold and gold silver mixed. So. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I liked it, and hey, neat little conversion and my second skull cannon. So there you go. That's done for my side project, Corn Girls Army. So that was a lot of fun. All right, and then we come to this. So this was the second piece I did for this, and so this is the limited edition Joan of Arc out of the Infinity range, and for her. I did her in like the, I don't know, I guess blue metallic power armor. But there is steel mixed in here as well.
And plates. This is a good point, right? Is that it doesn't have to always be, the technique does not have to be used on a normal metallic surface, right? It can be this whole Space Marine or something of that sort, from a very deep, almost blackish red to a bright red, or from your blue to your very light blue / white, like you kind of did here, where it definitely does not have to be mostly black and gray, right? It doesn't have to be a steel color. It works very, very nicely in color as well.
Yep, absolutely. And taking it to that, taking these colors up to these high contrasts with the white, it just like it's the same techniques, and it makes the plates look metallic, right? When you have this dark ridge of the deeper blue under her breast armor, up to the high white, it creates that reflection. What's that?
Herbert.
Yes. And here's what I'll say about this. So the technique I followed for this is actually out of the Angel Giraldez masterclass book for Infinity. which is a totally awesome book that I highly recommend. He is an absolute, an unbelievably amazing painter. And I use a lot of his techniques here. And this is, you made the mention of like airbrush. Now, certainly all of the paint you're looking at, what's on the top layer here is all brushwork, right? Mm-hmm. But I agree with you completely. Like, airbrush is such a good way to get this going. So like, she was based in a very deep, almost purple blue, and then highlighted or then sort of kind of layered up, just leaving like I didn't shoot up at like this angle from directly below her, right? With like the blue, I'd have to look back at my recipes to see the actual blue, but like a mid-tone blue, and then a highlight blue brought down, and then a white for a points of light, right? And with an airbrush, that's so easy to do, to pick out these points of light. And then I went back and ridged and took a very deep, the same thing I had undercoated with, and I lined all of this armor. All these ridge lines in between the power armor are me taking like an eye detail brush and just tracing around them and in between them.
Black lining.
Yep. Yeah, not with black, like with a very purple blue, right? Because I didn't want it to be so stark. But yes, black lining, same technique. And then going back with white and cutting the edges of the armor, so you get the highlights. And then from there, you just start working in the layers, right? And so that was how the armor was done. The sword is another example of like making sort of a non-metallic metal pattern in other colors, right? So here I'm in this like turquoise color, but it's the same trick, right? To make it look like metal. You start from this darker color down here, and you come up and you have like the white line goes up to the bright to the white in the middle, and then up to the white at the tip, and then catching the ridge lines of the sword, right? Mm-hmm. So you've got your reflection and then your tip reflection. This is an absolutely great model, although if she was in plastic instead of metal, that would be so much better. Her arm fell off like 4 times when I was painting her, because this arm is so heavy from this big sword, and it's attached by basically a dream and like a wish and rainbows.
Yeah, for metal models, I sort of came accustomed to doing a green stuff ball sandwich with super glue to kind of paste it in there like cement.
I absolutely should have done that. I didn't even. I did use a bonding agent in like a little piece of paper in the middle, right? Like tissue or whatever, to bond it together, and it still came off again. And it's just too small to pin, because like the top of her arm here there's nothing to it. I mean, it's razor thin.
Yeah.
Right. So whatever. Metal models, complaint later. But yeah, so this was a lot of fun to paint. I'm super happy with how she came out. And I think she was just a lot of fun. I'm very happy with how her face came out too. And when I uploaded the picture, Google asked me who this was on all of the face pictures. So I'm always proud when that happens.
Nice.
Yeah, the same techniques of going from the dark to the light, you can use it in any color. As you see here in the sword and her blue armor. If I was doing Space Marines, this is absolutely the technique I would want to use on my Space Marines, right? To make that. Yeah.
I just have to ask you real quick, when you've been doing this non-metallic metal while you were doing it, when you came off to something like the cape or something like that, did you find yourself doing more harsh contrast, even though that wasn't your intention maybe when you did it?
100%, yes, 100%. No doubt. Like, I mean, you can look at that cape, right? And you can see how much I blended and did the contrast of the red. Red's always an easy color to blend with anyways. But yeah, this goes to like yellow at the very edge. Of course, yellow doesn't show up in these photos for whatever reason, but yes, in person, there's like yellow at the very edge of this, and orange and stuff there. And yeah, 100%. I was like, I must push the contrast all the time, and like
contrast button up.
You do want to watch that, because that does get dangerous. And so after I'd finished her, I had this, And she looks like she's primarily in like 3 colors. Like if you just glance at her, you're like, okay, she's like blue and red and turquoise, I guess maybe. And I looked at this and I was like, this is kind of the paints that I used for her, for that model. And I was like, that's an interesting thing, just how many there are right there. So I thought that was kind of fun.
Well, that's what I was doing at the beginning of the show. I just finished my model today, and I was slowly just migrating all the stuff back from my desk to the paint rack that migrated onto the desk and never made its way back.
Yeah, I got to make their way home.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. So, final thoughts on our non-metallic challenge.
I don't really have any take homes. I mean, it's not my first rodeo in terms of that. It's certainly, I'm not that experienced, so it was definitely a nice learning experience still. Every time I do it, I feel like I learn a new trick or trade, you know, trying to do it. But again, I think that it's just one of the more, it's a patience level technique where, you know, you need to spend a little more time with things, and I think you learn a lot by doing it. So again, I would highly recommend you try it. Don't go crazy when you try it. You know, start on something like a shield or like a sword. You don't have to do a whole damn armored model, right? That's going to drive you insane. So just start with something simple. You know, something that's mostly earth tones or something like that with a metal sword or something like that. Pick out your Skaven or some crap. Yeah, I would definitely recommend doing it, and I always think that it's a good learning experience to do.
Absolutely agreed. All right. Thus ends it. Okay, let's go back. Let's stop the screen share there. All right. Very good. What do you feel? Do you feel that challenge was successful?
I like how it turned out. I got to that point where it was on my bench, and I was like, I don't want this here anymore. So some last coats, I think, were probably rushed a little more so than they needed to be, but that happens when you're fiddling with a model for so long, trying to get it right, that, you know, you get to the point where you're just like, I don't care anymore. You know, and that's also part of it, right? Is that endurance factor with a model where instead of, you know, just screwing it and getting it done, you know, you put it off the side and do something else and come back to it. I think that's a very good thing to do. None of this was marathon painting. A lot of it was 3-4 hour sessions coming back. That's also how I progressed to a large time spent on one model. Was one of the better painters, you know, when I was listening to people who do Golden Demons and things like that, they never finish a model. They never do a full painting session to finish a model. If they think a model's done, they leave it there overnight and come back to it in the morning. And that's, if they think again it's done after a few, you know, tweaks or whatever, then they put it away. But you never finish a model the first time when you think it's done, if you're going for a higher level painting.
That is absolutely a great piece of advice. Yes, the idea of one more look after you've stepped away, right? That is just so important. Set it down once you think you're done. Walk away. Don't keep staring at it, because you're going to keep missing the same things you missed before, right? Walk away, work on something else for a couple hours, go watch TV, go for a jog, sleep on it, whatever you got to do. And then come back and look at it with fresh eyes. And it's amazing what you'll see that you never caught, even staring at it for 6-7 hours straight.
Mm-hmm.
Great advice.
That would be my advice for those long haul type of things. Again, if you want to try it, I would suggest pre-mixing your paints. A lot of the frustration comes from, you know, mixing your paint on your palette and then going, oh, that was just too high of a contrast to start with. I have to glaze it back down or whatnot. So having those pre-made, pre-mixed are kind of nice, so you know exactly where you're going, and you're only working with a color or two at a time instead of trying to blend through 3 or 4 colors together.
Always save those old paint bottles. You kill a bottle of paint, save that dropper bottle. Wash it out, put it somewhere in your hobby supplies, and next time you need to pre-mix something, boom, you're ready to go.
I also am pretty sure I got this 12-pack of these dropper bottles off Amazon for like $7. So
there you go. Absolutely. Okay, so shall we turn to our tips and tricks section of the show this week?
Tips and tricks.
Tips and tricks. Excellent. All right. So tips and tricks. This week, we wanted to talk about undercoating. I mean, going with non-metallic metals, a lot of glazing and stuff like that. And so we wanted to talk about undercoating and the idea of having, some people call it like a shade layer underneath, or having an undercoat. It's generally going under your base coat, and how important that is and how it can affect the model. And I think that the trick to this is a lot of people sort of prime their model. Maybe you always prime in one color. I don't support that, but that was our priming episode. I already talked about that. And then when you're done, you just start painting over it. And you think, this section is supposed to be green. I am going to start painting green over this section. But that is not always the right way to go, because certain colors want to have other shade layers underneath them before you climb up to them. What are your initial thoughts on this, Paul? How much do you like? I know you're a big fan of zenithal highlighting in your priming, which is effectively sort of establishing that shade layer underneath, right, just through your primer.
Yeah, I don't know if I have a specific technique I like to use for this. I do spend a lot of time thinking about what sort of feel I want. So just for example, on my Chaos Lord, I actually started my skin with, I turned away my light, now you can't see. Ooh, hang on now. Sort of a purplish pink tone right there. I don't know if you can make that out. And that's obviously not particularly a skin tone. And I went up to a natural skin color after that. But what that does is that sort of lighting underneath and that light coats that you do afterwards gives the model a feel, because you're never really covering that whole base coat per se. So it gives sort of a feel and sort of a tone. And that's how you get sort of your warm and cool atmosphere as well, and sort of your different feeling to the model. Again, so another example is something you wouldn't really think of. Base coating in your browns for your yellows to kind of get this cool color underneath, or even when you're using non-metallic golds, for example, as we talked about that all today, using purples as your shades or your undercoat is actually very, very good. And some colors that you just wouldn't think quite matter, but it gives this richness and this vibrance from below. I don't know how to really explain a good way to start doing that, but a lot of it's just researching and reading what colors start where. The best thing I could say is, do not try and color over a dark color. Like dark, I mean, we'll just go for the most premier. Don't try and put yellow over black. That's just a dumb idea, right? And you wouldn't do that. And it's sort of that same concept with smaller nuances is sort of what we're getting at, right? I'm sure that some of you have tried to brush bright yellow over your black primer and it hasn't gone too well. And that's sort of the concept we're going with here, just to a more extreme extent.
Exactly. And just so here we go. I've prepared a little reference for us here. We're going to jump back into screen share. Let me lock it on myself first. There we go. So here's just a nice little reference for that. So let's jump through all this. So here we go. Okay, so what I did here, this is just some envelope that was from some mail upstairs. And what I did here is I just threw just one quick spray of brown, gray, white, and black. And you can see these are not very thick. Like if you primered, you'd probably honestly have it thicker than this, right? Like that black is basically not black, because I just literally went and ran the spray can over it faster than you would ever prime. And then I took just one brush stroke basically, or just one dollop of paint, went back forth a few times of these 6 colors. Now these are mostly model colors. I've got a Model Air Steel here, but so this is model color is a pretty thick paint out of the dropper. It's really meant to be diluted for you to work with. You shouldn't really paint with this stuff flat. You really need to thin model color. And you can see here, so if we look at the red, look at the tonal variations between what red looks like over brown, over white, and then over black, right? And that really, red and green, man, do they show the colors underneath, right? Like how much brighter is this here than this here? And the tonal variations that you get in how warm it is versus how cold it is, right? Blue and purple, on the other hand, are very opaque colors. Most of the time, most ranges, these are pretty thick paints. Even so, if we look here at the purple that's over this simple one quick, just like not even fully black, look how much darker it is here than here, right? This is a full shade layer or highlight layer level difference in color just because of what I put this over. And again, this isn't thinned at all. This is literally like straight out. So this is much thicker than you would be working with if you were actually putting paint to model.
And I think one of the easiest ways to even see this yourself, if you're sort of non-believing or kind of not understanding the effect totally, what you can do that's really, really easy that you can see is you can do it the rough way or the smooth way. You can take a model, prime it black, dry brush over it white, and then put your color that you want over that in sort of a flat way like Vince has done here, and you'll totally see the difference. It's almost like you did a level of highlighting initially that you didn't really, that you actually did do, but you didn't think you did because you put a color over, the base color that was different.
Yep. Absolutely. And the other big note I want to pull out here is if you look at the gold versus the steel, or this is like, yeah, that's actually Model Air steel. Gold is such a translucent paint, and almost, unless you're using like the Vallejo liquid gold, the alcohol-based gold, almost any gold you buy on the market is an incredibly translucent paint. Acrylic gold, just because the nature of it, is very, very see-through. And so that is why, and if you look down this range, the only part of this that really looks like gold is the stuff over the brown. So, I've heard it said many times, but I can't repeat it enough. If you're going to paint gold, you should be painting the area you're going to paint gold either some tone of brown or red, or actually even purple can work first. But if you go with like a stock brown, that's going to get you what you want. Because
back to atmosphere that you want too, right? You just mentioned off a couple of things. Your dark oaky brown, your reddish brown, or your purple. You know what I mean? Those give you different feels, and you can see that right through the undercoat, right? So your chaos or your darker, you get a dark purple with gold, or not dark, a more deep purple, because I don't want to say dark, but a deeper purple will give you sort of a more menacing tone of gold, things like that. And you can kind of play with that undercoat to give you a different feel.
Yep. Now, I would say the same for green and red. Any of these paints that you see that are very translucent, you need to be thinking, I didn't do yellow here, but yellow would have been an absolute joke had I ran it over this. And if I would have thought about it, I would have. But any yellow is incredibly translucent, as is orange, really, because orange is just sort of a combination of two already translucent paints. So I think that what this says to me, just base, is when you're doing this, you want to think about what's underneath it, and setting up your color layers underneath can actually make your work later much easier. So let me go to an easy example here. So here we have this Bretonian Lord I just finished, right, for this week. So we can see this like very dark to very light purple transition, right? And the reality is this is actually only one highlight of purple, okay? Why? Because all of the work was done in shade layers, where and it was done with an airbrush, to be very fair, but this went black, somber gray, wolf gray, white. And then over that, I did just a very thin glaze of dark purple, and then used some glazes of one lighter color purple to kind of work it out. And then I just used a midtone to even it out, right,
Mm-hmm.
where that had happened. But it didn't require lots of steps of highlighting, but you get this nice smooth transition. And like, if you look at that, there's, that's pretty smooth. And Like I can see a little bit of color differentiation of a hard line there, but really that's pretty smooth. And it was easier because of how I set it up. Now, I happen to do this with an airbrush, but the reality is you could get most of the way here with a rattle can just by shooting it with black. Just some zenithal highlighting would get you a lot of the way here. Black all over, gray at a 45-degree angle, white at a 90-degree angle straight down. Right?
Yeah, I've done it many times with a spray can. It's not that hard.
Yep. So these kind of like undercoating can not only is it essential to using some colors. So for example, when I laid down this gold, all of this was brown first. All these reds were brown first. But it can, so you know that all of that was set up. Whereas under the purples and the blacks, it started as gray and black and white because I wanted them to be in that sort of range. But in addition to that, it can not only set you up for the colors, but it can actually make your later steps, your highlighting, easier. Because it can make it so you don't have to try to work with a bunch of different layers and try to build through 10 different steps on a large flat surface. Let the undercoat do that work for you, and then the hard transitions or whatever that happen to be underneath there, those will get mostly cut out and covered up by the glaze layer you're putting on to get the real color. So yeah, there you go. Undercoating. So I guess the take-home point is next time you paint a model, you know, think about what you should paint underneath. My general rules of thumb would be brown under red, green, and gold. These aren't 100%. Just these are nice, easy things. If you want just a sort of simple step, and you can experiment out from here. Gray under metal, like steel. And then I like gray and white. You can do gray, white, or black under purple or blue, and you will get, like, you can use one color of purple, but if you're painting it over gray, white, and black, you will get completely different colors of purple on the other side of it if you thin out your paint without the need to ever highlight. Any other thoughts from you there, Paul, on that one?
Not so much. I mean, I think that's pretty much it. Again, the simple ones. I see a lot of people have trouble with yellows and sort of those light colors, those translucent colors. And I think we hammered that home that you need to think about what's below that instead. You know, I mean, at the very, very least, you need to go, you know, white and then do a couple thin layers of yellow before you start.
Yep. I personally, my recipe for when I need to put white over any other color is I actually start with Vallejo, the extra opaque, which is like their high density pigment line, right? The game color extra opaque. Mm-hmm. I start with the extra opaque heavy brown and then cover that completely with a thin layer of the extra opaque heavy gold brown, and then do a layer of 50-50 white gold brown, and then put the white over top of that. And that you can get, and that sounds like a lot of work, but the reality is that is much less work than trying to do the thin layers of white 100 times, right? Because that's what you need to do otherwise. And like in general, when you're painting white, it's about getting the paint thin, keeping it very, you know, very, I don't want to say watery, but darn near it. And with a glaze medium or something like that. And then just doing layers over and over and over again to get that really smooth white. And this lets you kind of shortcut that because that gold brown just building up to it, it works so well with white. And where did that come out of? That came out of non-metallic metal painting gold, right? Like that's one of your basic sort of, that's a very simple shade progression for non-metallic metal gold. So brought it full circle, you see.
Again, a lot of these things, as I said, that non-metallic metal is a very intensive, like it uses a lot of techniques together. So if you want to learn all these blending and this, you know, undercoating and stuff like that, it's a good place to start. If you can get a non-metallic metal looking right, you'll know how to do all these things.
Exactly right. Okay, well, so there you go. That's the excellent tip of the week. Excellent. All right. Tip of the week. All right. So I think with that, it's time to set up next week's challenge. Excited, Paul?
Before we continue, and before I forget, last time I made mention that we would check the comments questions area if we need to.
Oh, okay. Yes, very good. Let me do
Because we get so into it and then we forget and we close out the show.
that. Doom and Darkness watching. He said he wishes he could do that effect on the Chaos Lord's weapon. You can, buddy. You can. It's all you. Just give it a shot. You never know. Okay. So, and then he has a question for us. He said, if I want to do a glow effect, can I buy paints with a built-in glow effect, or is it something I need to create by contrast and layering, etc.? And if I can buy them, which paints do you recommend? That's a great question.
I've never. So okay. So glow effect. I'm guessing you're kind of talking about sort of the thing I talked about. So I have a couple what I guess I would call glow effect. There's several things that they make, which you can make yourself. But so like this Vallejo transparent green is sort of glowy, and then this ghost tint is this range from Minotaur that I don't know if I would use this out of a brush. I don't think it works quite well. It's this candy coat concept from airbrushing, like automotive airbrushing that they do. And it does give you some glow effects, but all it really is a very thinned down, bright paint. So really all you need to do is work on your undercoats and, get that high contrast you want, and then do that very light glaze up to where you need it over your glowing effect. Other than that, I don't know if I would recommend any other paints per se, Vince. Do you have any other recommendations on that? Usually what I do is this is sort of my friend with that, is just use this glazing medium and
glaze medium is my best friend. I do actually. Right there, that's my other recommendation. Good old Nilic Oxide. This is one of my best friends in the world for doing glow effects, ghosty effects, spirits, all that stuff. This has a wonderful tint to it. There's also like a neon green color that I think trying to remember. I think Tamiya makes it, maybe. I know they make one, and I think Vallejo makes a really bright neon in the special effects line as well. But this guy,
I find that they're pretty glowy.
Yeah. But so when it's exactly what you said. I mean, if you think about it, any bright paint can work, right? It just needs to be the trick with doing it. And I'm sure we'll get to OSL eventually, but just sort of it's effectively playing in that field, is to keep it thin. When light shines on something, so there's light on my hand right now, and there's that's just it. Like there's a million examples of everything you need in your normal life right now. There is light on my hand, right? Like my hand is catching the light above it. But you can still, but the light isn't pure white except maybe at the tiniest of edge. Like you're still seeing the flesh tone of my hand underneath. If I take a flashlight and stick it up to my hand like this, right, it doesn't turn my hand white. It turns my hand sort of that flesh color as the light shines through, right? So the key is to work in a very thin glazed paint and drag it sort of toward your light source, toward where you want the glow. So if this were to be the source of my light and it's casting its light here, I would take the paint, this very bright color, in a thin glaze, and I would do a lot of glazes like this, right? So the brightest spot is going to end up closest to the thing casting the light. And the thinnest is up here. And each time you do it, you just kind of draw in.
Usually what I do, it comes out a little, I think a little more cartoony, maybe a little less natural, sort of what you're talking about, is usually I glaze 1 or 2 layers of very, very thin white, where I want to get especially closer. And so I do like a closer thing of white, dragging, like you say, very, very thin. It should leave sort of that dusty white look, more so than an actual layer, so that you are getting that transparency through. And then drag the color that you want from a little bit farther away in through the white, so you get that brightest effect near your source and sort of layer 2 tones, right? You got the depth below, and then the object source lighting getting weaker as you get farther away. So it's sort of a 2D or 3D layering dimension, but sort of that's how you're getting the effect, both this way and what you're doing layering below.
Yep, I like it, absolutely. And the real key with it is just to make sure that the thing that, also another key to anything glowing, make sure the thing that is glowing is brighter than anything it's casting light on. right?
Yeah.
The light bulb is brighter than the wall next to it. I mean, it's that easy. So there you go. Hopefully that helps, Doom. OSL is on our list, so don't worry. We will get there eventually. And Dark CT says some great models shown off today. So thank you very much, Dark CT. Appreciate that. I know that I really think this was a great week for what we managed to achieve. So I know I am very happy with it. All right, and I think that was the questions that people posted up. So there you go from this week. But if you have any more questions, as always, put them in the comments below. We will look at them, and next time we do this, we will remember to look first, because I didn't look at last week's comments, but I think we answered them all in the comments. But if anybody has anything you don't feel we answered, I will go back and check them again to make sure we did answer them. So, because we want to make sure this is a community experience. One other thing, if you want, not only do please post your questions, but if you have some models you want to try with anything we've talked about today, or you have some examples of this stuff and these techniques in practice, one, you should join the PMP if you're not already. Painters Motivating Painters. It's a Google Plus community. It's a great community of people that shares their work. You put up a pledge, you work toward it, you put up your finished models. It's a great little collective for advice and feedback and critiques, and just we all get better together. And two, if you do a model, we would love to see it. Send it to us. We'll put it on the show next week. Or, sorry, in 2 weeks. Don't you want to have your models on the show? Of course you do. So take up on the challenge. Send us the photos, and we'll show them as well.
We'll happily go backwards, too. If you have something from the previous challenges, whatever we did gore, and we did
Faces and eyes.
Faces and eyes. So if you have something that you want to show off a really beautiful face, or you want to do some gore effect that you like doing, send it in. We'll go backwards. We have no problem with that.
Absolutely. Could not agree more. Yeah, I myself will probably be going back on the blood and gore here sometime soon, because look at who's showing up. Oh, it's a little mister gonna scream at you.
Here, guys.
He looks so sad without his wings. All right.
That looks like a derpy puppy. He's just like, ah!
All right. All right. So Doom said, I am a big painting noob, but when you glaze, are you talking about, for example, the Citadel glazes, or something you make yourself with a medium? The answer is yes. So Citadel has a couple pre-mixed colors. Their actual glaze line, not the shades. This is actually thicker and more inky. Like, this is actually probably using an ink or something. I don't know the chemical consistency, but it is different and will leave a different residue behind. Their glaze line is actually paint. But really, I'm talking about taking this and mixing it with a lot of what Paul showed you, which would be...
So just so we're bringing it back full circle in terms of, so everyone can understand, whenever we say glaze, simplest terms, it means we're putting a layer of paint over that only you can see about 90% of what below it is shown, right? Yep. We're more so tinting what was below it than actually putting down a layer of paint.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, a glaze is hyper thin. The easiest thing I can say is skim milk. The ratios of, like, I do use like a drop of water sometimes as well, in addition with a glazed medium. I find it kind of just does help to have a little water in there.
In the wise words of Ant, if you feel like you're not doing anything, you're doing it right.
There you go. Yeah, the first we were there to paint a soda, and Ant started glazing, and he said, I put a glazed layer of blue over this other blue, and nothing changed. Perfect. That is exactly what should happen. It should change very little. It should, because when you're glazing, you're relying on going, let it dry. Let it dry. Let it dry. Repeat this 20, 30 times. That sounds crazy, but it's really not, because the reality is, what are you doing? You're taking the model and you're going glaze, 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 bring it down here, and then here, and then here, and then here, and then here. And by the time I get to this side of my thumb, the first side over here I was painting is done. And I start over. I go down, because when you're working with paint that's that thin, it dries just snap quick. And you just work your way around the model over and over again. Get yourself in the rhythm. It is honestly easier than you think, and you do it enough, it gets cathartic. And you like how thin you take it and such like that. You really need to get down to that consistency if you're not just trying to get like a centerpiece or display quality. Glazing has different levels of thinness to it.
So it can also be used for something very simple in like troop choice. You know what I mean? Like if you're doing troop level stuff, you go your dark color, you do a hard highlight, and then you glaze over the top of that to sort of transition it a little bit, and then you're good to go.
Exactly.
Right? It doesn't have to be a million transitions if you don't want it to. The glaze is sort of to even out the harshness of a layer.
Yep, that's perfect. That's a great example. Take a very simple technique. You got something, you dry brush it. Everybody loves dry brushing because it's like the simplest technique. And if people do it on fur or feathers or something the first time, and they're like, "Oh my God, I'm a genius! Look at what I have brought." And it will make things. But then they start dry brushing a lot of other stuff, and it makes it look chalky, and because it doesn't have the texture of hair or fur or feathers, which is supposed to look rough and coarse, which is what dry brushing will do. Dry brushing will make things look raw and rough and coarse. But it does pick out highlights. Thin that paint down to a glaze, run that glaze over it just 2 or 3 times, and watch as it smooths out those edges and gets rid of that roughness. Is it going to be something you're going to win a golden demon with? No. But is it going to look really great on the tabletop? Yeah, probably. And it's honestly, the amount of extra work, minimal.
It goes from, oh, I see you painted that, to, hey, that looks pretty good.
Exactly. So, hey, what's that? We're talking about soft scores this week anyway, so why not? It's a couple extra points for you at tournament. Hey, there you go. All right. So, I think that's all our questions answered. Anything else I need to cover before we generate the challenge for this week?
I don't think so.
All right. Shall we read the list again and see what we've got?
Let's run it down.
Running it down. As always, we will have 10 random items to select from for our challenge. For this week, we will have two weeks to complete that challenge with at least one model. Here we go. Number 1, basing challenge. I guess we'll do some bases. It's got to be good basing, not just some grass and mud. Number 2, freehand capes. That's a fun one. Number 3, just added by me today. This was to replace non-metallic metal steel. The speed paint challenge. Oh, can Paul and I do models in less than an hour or 2 hours?
I cannot. It's going to look horrible.
I'm excited about that one. Speed paint challenge.
I'm literally going to pick, like, I'm going to sculpt the stick figure.
Order the Stick actually makes, I don't know if you ever read that comic, Order the Stick. It's like a D&D type comic. And it used to be in the back of Dragon magazine. They actually make stick figure miniatures. Their arms and legs are little stick figures, or sticks. They're adorable. Okay. Number 4, F this color, yellow. We're going to work with the very tough color of yellow and making yellow look right, using yellow as sort of a very big color on a mini. Number 5, gems. Shiny, happy gems. Number 6, painting pure white. So again, another very tough color to make look right. Number 7, OSL. Number 8, working with true metallic metal to make it look not just flat and boring, because making true metallic metal look good honestly should employ a lot of the techniques of non-metallic metal. It shouldn't just be throw it on, wash it, done. There's a lot. If you want to make that really look pop and look like metal, we're going to carry it a little farther. Number 9, fire and ice. So a single piece that is both warm and cold and making that look good. And number 10, that big mother. So this is going to be painting a giant piece. Something
bigger.
Exactly. Chariot sized or bigger. All right. That is the set of challenges. As always, we have our trusty 10-sided die of fate, specially blessed by Zinch himself. Here we go.
If we get speed painting, I'm going to cry.
I'll remember that. Number 3. Oh, 3 is not the color of Zinch, or the number of Zinch. So there you go. All right, here we go.
It's not a 3.
My hands are up here. I have not touched the die. What does that say?
What a douche.
the changer of ways. He speaks. All right.
Well,
So,
if you're not going to tune into one, don't tune in next week.
you know it had to be that, Paul, just because such is the fate. Oh, that's just great. You gotta love dice.
Speed.
All right.
Yay.
Speed paint challenge. All right. Well, I said we'd set the hard rules when we rolled it, and hey, we did. How exciting.
Model choice is going to play so heavily into this one. You think I could just find something that's like entirely fur? Maybe just like a fur ball?
Paint a tribble. All right. Speed paint challenge. Here we go. What are the base rules? Man-sized or larger. 2 figs minimum.
Wait, so it has to be what size or larger?
Man-sized or larger. Not us, not 1-to-1 scale. Just like, a 28 millimeter man-sized fig. In other words, you can't paint a rock.
Yeah.
Right?
So we're doing one in 1 hour, and we're doing another one in 2 hours.
Yes. Set your phone next to you. From the time priming is finished, we will not count priming, and because like you prime, it has to dry, all that. So you want prime to be set up. Like you don't want to purposely screw the miniature by having primer not be set. So, like that's fine. From the time you put it on your desk post priming, and no pre-shading to high hell and back with other colors and calling it primer. So you can't get out 3 different colors with the airbrush.
Primers, or we're just doing black and white primers?
Yeah, that's what, or gray. Like I will accept one shade of like black, white, or gray.
Black, white, or gray. Okay.
Yeah. Yes. If you like do a quick Zenthal with a spray can, I think that's fair. Like just over the top or something. That's fine. But no airbrush like.
Oh, accidentally mostly painted, Vince. I have no idea what happened.
Yeah, exactly. No getting out the airbrush and just going to town. No, this is speed paint with the brush. Post primer.
Are we doing no airbrush? No airbrush this week?
That's fine. No airbrush with it at all. Rattle can only.
Okay, no airbrush at all. All right, that was your call, not mine. But all right.
All right. Let's do it. Because an airbrush does really help you speed paint things faster. But we'll I think maybe this should also set up our tip for next week. I think next week should be our airbrush tips, right? Okay. Because we'll be wanting to really talk about them after doing this and how we could have done certain things so much easier. So it'll be a great lead in. Okay. All right. So 1 fig in 1 hour, 1 fig in 2 hours. At least man-sized, after primer, no more than like 2 colors used in priming, got to be rattle can priming.
There's going to be a lot of strategy and model choice in this one.
Sure. Have to use at least 3 colors on the model. Not that I ever doubt you would do less, but have to use at least 3 colors on the model.
White.
Yeah, exactly. Like, obviously. Not that I think that you'd ever try to get away with that. And, I don't think we'd cheat any other ways. I'm trying to think of other ways I would cheat that I could shortcut myself.
I will totally think of something to cheat.
There you go. So we got a minimum of 2 models. The speed painting challenge is on.
Are we allowed to fly next to a black hole like Interstellar?
Well, only if the power of love is stronger than the physics of the universe, and you can use that to tap out the secrets of the universe in a watch while hiding in a closet that's in the 4th dimension or something. Perfect. I didn't really figure out that movie. It was very complicated. I don't know what was going on there.
Most of the time.
Yeah, I feel like I need some kind of idiot's guide to Interstellar. Like, I don't feel like I'm a moron, but that movie was a bit strange. All right. So, speed painting. Let it begin. All right, folks. And hey, this one's an easy one to contribute to. If you out there want to participate, we'd love to see what you speed paint in an hour.
Lauren, we're calling you out.
That's right. The king of speed painting with a speed painting tutorial already made. Come on, this is primed and ready for you. You do this once a week already.
All right.
All right. Any closing thoughts before we end the show?
No, I'm gonna have to think about this one a lot. I don't know what model I want to ruin.
The speed painting challenge is on.
This maybe a Hordes model. Hordes or 40K, I'm thinking.
This is time for an off model. Very good. All right, folks. Well, with that, I have nothing else. Thank you, as always. Please ask your questions, send us your models, whatever. We thank you very much. This is a community project. We love all the participation. It's been a lot of fun so far. And, you know, as we say it every week, we'll repeat it here. We are not the experts. We're challenging ourselves because we need to learn and we need to get better. And we want to just share our failings and successes along the way with you. And we'd love to have your input and thoughts on it as well. So thank you very much for coming along on this excellent hobby adventure.
Thanks again, guys.
See you next time.